Hey guys, this is Andrew Price from BlenderGuru.com. A couple of months ago when I released the introduction to smoke simulation video, a lot of you requested a tutorial on how I achieved the helicopter fly-through of New York City, because I mentioned it was using a technique called camera mapping. So that's what I'm going to be showing you today. So I'll start with a very brief slideshow presentation which explains what camera mapping is, how it works, and I'll then be giving you a tutorial on how you can use this effect yourself to create a scene using camera mapping. And then at the end of the video, I'll be showing you a trick that I've learned very recently, which allows you to achieve the handheld camera effect very quickly using a new feature in Blender 2.5. So I hope you enjoy the video. Let's get started.
Alright, so let's start with the basics. What is camera mapping? In a nutshell, basically camera mapping allows you to take a still photo, apply 3D geometry to it, to produce the illusion of real video footage when you move the camera through the scene. So this is used a lot by visual effects artists to produce very cost effectively the illusion of video shots. So it's used a lot for scenery, such as a helicopter flying over mountains, which would cost thousands of dollars to film. They can instead just take a still photo and then hire a 3D artist to make it look like video footage very quickly. So just to explain it further, if you were to imagine a digital projector, okay, it fires an image out of the lens onto a projector screen. Now imagine for a second if when the projector turns off, the image was to remain stuck to the projector and these people in front of it. That is essentially what camera mapping is. Okay, so if you have a look at your Blender camera, okay, so imagine that it's looking at a bunch of empty block objects, okay? Now if you were to fire an image of the city out of that lens onto those block objects, with them all lined up, if you rendered it, it would produce the photo image, basically. Okay, and then if you were to move the camera back and forth with minimal camera movements, it can give the illusion of real footage of a real helicopter fly-through through the city. So that is basically what camera mapping is used for. Now, there are three ways to do this in Blender. You can do it the UV mapping way, the UV projection with the UV projection modifier, or with sticky mapping. Now, in my opinion, these first two suck. Okay, I've tried them myself. They're really difficult. It seems as though all the planets need to align to make sure everything works okay. It's very fiddly. The UV mapping projection mode, where you just go UV project from this mode, you have to make sure you have the right image set properly or else it all screws up. The UV projection modifier involves having multiple cameras to fire images onto plane objects, but the best one in my opinion is sticky mapping, so that's the one I'm going to be teaching you today. Alright, so let's get on to the tutorial. Alright, so this is the finished result that we're going to be making. So it's a basic fishing hut sitting next to a lake there. Now as you can see with this animation, the camera doesn't move very much. So it just moves slightly forward and slightly to the west. That's really all the movement that you need to give the illusion of a video footage. This thing's got very basic geometry, so it's just got a basic hut there, a couple of other objects as well, but it's fairly easy to produce. Now to get your image, I'd suggest finding an image off Flickr that looks good. There's plenty of good photographers out there making good stuff and putting it on here. Making sure, of course, the image you choose does have a Creative Commons license so you can edit it and things. I'll give a link to this photo underneath the video if you want to play along at home. Now when you get the image, what you need to do is to work out which objects are going to need geometry. So as you can see here, I've just done a basic outline to show you what I mean. So I know this hut is going to be a basic cube with a bit of a pointy triangle at the top. The pallets here are just going to have a basic cube. This drum looking thing, I'm going to make it a cylinder. This anchor, I'm just going to make a flat plane because it doesn't need to move very much. And then on top of that, we've got the floor here, which is just this ice sheet, and that I'm just going to make one single flat plane. And behind that, you've got the ocean, which is a little bit lower than the ice. And then in the background there, you've got the mountains and the sky, which can be just one flat plane or a UV sphere if you want. It's up to you. Okay, so once you've worked that out, you can jump into Blender. So with the default scene selected, go ahead and delete the cube and the lamp. Now go to side view and press Ctrl Alt number pad 0, and that will make the camera snap to the side view. Now we need to add the background image. Now in 2.5 that is located in this side toolbar here. So to turn that on, press the N key, and then under background images, select add image, then find the image that you saved off the internet. One other little tip, you can actually set the axis now in 2.5. So I'm going to set that to camera, which means now in front and side view, the image doesn't display anymore, only when you go to camera. So that's a little quick tip there that's very handy to know. Now the next thing you need to do is change the dimensions of the file. So I'm going to make this the dimensions of the image, which is 1200 by 800. That I know for a fact that that's what the dimensions are for that image. Now the reason for that is, as you can see when I'm changing that, like if I make this 2000, as you can see this image in the background that we're looking at distorts as well. So it needs to be the exact image dimension so that the perspectives of your scene are worked out correctly. Now next thing you need to do is select your camera and just move it up slightly. As you can see, you've got the grid floor in the background there. Now we need to match up this grid floor with our with the scene, sorry, with the photo basically. So just judging it by eye, you can see that perspective wise, it's still probably a little bit too high. So that's probably a bit too much. So you want to just estimate, just so that this grid floor looks about like it would match up in real life. So that's looking okay to me. And the next thing we're going to do is add a cube. Now this cube is going to act as the basic point at which the object starts. So I'm going to move that up slightly so it's just resting along this x-axis there, along the grid floor. Okay, that's probably, I don't know what's going on there. Okay, alright. Now we just need to move this cube just so that it's in line with this shed. Now I'm not moving it along the Z axis, only along the X and Y. So now that we've got that flat line there just in line with the shed, we know that it's now in about the right place to begin starting our scene. So we can now go ahead and add a plane and just scale it upwards like so. Now that is going to act as this ice sheet here, this ground that our house here is going to be sitting on. Okay, now with this cube selected, we need to rotate it so that it matches this ice hut thing here, okay? So I'm just turning on the rotating handles there. I'm just going to rotate it slightly to about there. And then I'm going to turn on face mode and then select local here. And that will enable me to just move it along the local object dimensions like so. I think that's the wrong one, that handle. Green handle. Okay, so that matches up with that. That one's looking alright. And that is there as well. So that is that's the basically where our shed is fitting in correlation with the scene. Now, depending on what photo, the photo that was taken, you may need to change the lens of your camera. So by default in Blender it's 35. Now I know for a fact that with this photo it was actually taken with a 38, just from trial and error that I worked out. So with 38 you can see it matches up a little bit better than with 35. So if you're experimenting with your scene, you can't work out why nothing is fitting, it could just be that the lens is not, the Blender lens is not matching up with the correct one the photographer used. So now I'm just forming the basic roof here. Won't spend too much time on this. Now we actually want it to go past or go beyond what the of where it ends on the image, really. Now the reason for that is we're actually going to be isolating this shed from the rest of the image using an image editing program, which I'll show you in just a second. So it'll use an alpha channel, so it doesn't really matter if it goes past where the image ends. If that makes sense. I don't think that makes sense to me even. Okay, so that's looking okay. You could go into a bit more detail and make sure that lines up, but that is the basic premise for working out where it is. It is actually the most time-consuming process, just adding the first object and getting it to line up right. I know I had a very long, stressful night when I was doing the smoke simulation animation, just trying to get it to all work out right. So yeah, it can take a little bit of time, but once you've got it, it all seems to fall into place from there. Okay, so as I explained, we need to now move to our image editor. Now I'm going to use Photoshop. You can use GIMP if you want to. I'm not going to because I can't stand the interface myself. Besides, I paid for Photoshop, I might as well use it. So I'm going to be using Photoshop here. I've just got the pen tool now, and I'm just drawing the outline of the shed. It's very rough. Doesn't need to be perfect. Just make sure it lines up there. Control C, Control V. It's added that to a separate layer now. And now we've isolated that shed very easily. So now I'm just going to start a new folder. Files 2, and I'm just going to save this as shed. Now we need to make sure that the image format is PNG, because that will give us the alpha channel. So go ahead and save that. Now moving on to the fun part. So we want basically to do that thing that I discussed at the beginning where the Blender fires the image out of it onto the cube. So to do that, what we need to do, first of all, we'll set up the material for the object. So add a new material, turn on shadeless, because we don't actually need any lighting to our scene, because the image is already lit basically. Now turn on transparency and set it to 0, because we only want it to use the alpha channel in our image. So go to the texture panel, set it up for image, and find the image that we just created in our image editor. Now we need to enable pre-multiply so that we don't get that fuzzy, ugly edge around the outside. Now set the mapping to sticky, and I'll show you what that will do in a second. And we also need to enable alpha in the implement. So color and alpha, as long as those are checked, it should work. And I'll just save this in case it crashes, as it tends to do. Now if we render this now, we get nothing. Now the reason for that is that Blender doesn't know what the sticky coordinates are yet. Now to do that, just need to hit spacebar, type in sticky, and you've got add or remove sticky. I'm just going to hit add sticky. Now actually, if you like, you could probably just add it to the tool shelf because you might need it a lot. And also go ahead and add remove sticky as well, because those are you use them a lot when you're doing this process. But now that we've done that, we've added the sticky. If we hit render now, as you can see, our shed is now showing up. And if we moved the camera, then it would move according to, it would be already camera mapped. The shed is now ready to go. Now the next object is the floor. Now it's a little bit different this, and I'll show you why. So if we go back to our image editor, and I will trace around this very quickly, because I know how tedious it can be if you're watching a video tutorial. Someone is just going along with the path tool. Pretty sure I'd go insane if this was my job to do this every day. But alas, it needs to be done. So I'm just very roughly, these rocks are a bit difficult. Just painting around. Basic outline. Now if something's in front of it, like this anchor is here, just go through it like so. Doesn't matter that much. So I'll show you what we're going to be doing next. Like so. Just make sure these are included there. Get all those pixels. Control click. And then Control C, Control V. Okay, so now I've isolated the ground here. Now I'll just show you this this animation again. So as you can see, as the camera moves forward, you can see that behind the shed and the ocean here and things like that, we've got parts of the image that weren't there before. Now this effect is done with the clone tool in your image editor. So it does involve a little bit of know-how as to how to do that, but I'll just show you very briefly how I'm going to do that for the ground object. Okay, so selecting the clone tool, sure this is very similar to GIMP if you're using that. I'm going to set the hardness to about 70, and I'm just going to erase parts of it that are either going to have geometry there, such as that anchor, or that is going to be exposed. So this part's here, where the shed was, it's going to be exposed. So I'm just going to copy part of this little muddy texture over here as to where the shed was sitting, so that when the camera rolls past it, we've got, it looks very believable because it's got this sort of little foundation look underneath it. Now, one thing to note, unlike if you were doing a Photoshop manipulation, it doesn't really matter if it doesn't look perfect, because it's a moving image. Like if you had a look at the New York animation again, you'll notice so many different cloning errors. It's not funny, but you don't notice it because there's so much other stuff going on. So it doesn't need to be perfect is what I'm getting at. Now we'll just save that as well. And saved. There we go. So jump back into Blender. If we add, I'm just going to do the same thing we did very quickly with what we did for the ice hut. Now there is a problem that we're going to run into that is only specific to the floor. So that's why I'm showing you all this. Enable pre-multiply, alpha, mapping, sticky. Alright, enable tool, add sticky, as we did. Now if we render it, ta-da, the floor appears. Now I will show you something. Now that looks fine from that viewport. Something that we're going to run into later down the road is if we move this camera forward and we render this, something's happened. The ground has distorted and warped in a strange way. The shed looks fine, it looks great, but the ground looks horrible. Now it took me ages to work this out the first time it happened, but basically the reason for that is that with this plane it's one face. Okay, now I'm not sure if it's a bug in Blender or if there's a specific reason for it, but Blender needs more faces so it's got something to grip onto so it knows where the sticky mapping is. Otherwise you get that awful problem. So that's easily fixable by just subdividing a few times like so. Very easy to fix. Now if we jump back to camera here, add sticky again because we've changed it. And then I'll just jump into this camera, and there you go. It's looking a little bit. I probably just moved this camera around a little bit too much, so it's a bit warped. But yes, the problem is now fixed. So that is, if you run into that problem, that is the cause of it. Now we've got other objects here that we need to paint in. So we need to do this this plane for the anchor, the cylinder for the pallet, a cube for the pallets, as well as the ocean and the sky in the background. I won't show you all that in the tutorial because that would be painful to watch for you. So I'll jump now over to the almost a finished product. Just we'll show a few more steps from there, but we'll jump now over to that. Okay, so once we've added all the other objects, the scene should look a lot like this. So basically we've still got the flat ice plane there. We've got an image, a plane for the ocean. We've also added one cube for the pallets and a cylinder for that drum there as well. So that's basically it. So I had to isolate each of those in Photoshop. So this is just the ocean. Now I've stretched it beyond where it was, and I've cloned past where the shed was. I did the same with the snow that you saw. Got the shed there. The pallet, I made that a little bit wider. Add that little drum thing, and there's the anchor there as well. And then you combine that with this sky layer. Just talking about that one as well. I just disable all these so you can see it. So the sky, you don't actually really need to crop out any of this stuff because the sky is actually only going to use this. But I just cloned one of these mountains here and then smudged out the sky there just so it blended in with the rest of it, and it makes and it works at least anyway. It's good enough. So coming back to this scene here, I'll just show you how to add the sky because that can be problematic. So I'm going to add a UV sphere. That's what I'm going to make as the sky, so that it's inside. So that we're inside, I suppose, this big bubble, really. Okay, now we need to make it as wide as our horizon here, basically. So where the ocean ends, that's where the sky should start. I'll just make that a little bit lower like that. So that's looking fairly good. Okay, now we'll add the material for that as well, just as we did before. Very quickly, we actually need to enable transparency because it's the last object in the scene. So it's very quick for this step. Textures, sky. And or alpha as well, just need to enable sticky. And then add the sticky from the first frame. There we go. Alright, so that is basically, it's good to go now. One other thing to note, actually no, I'll show you that later, just when we do the camera movement. Okay, with the camera movement, we're going to hit I and then select location and rotation. Okay, so now basically what that has done, yeah, it's added a keyframe there for the location and rotation, so we need to keep that. Don't ever want to lose that keyframe, or else these objects, you're never going to be able to get them back in place again. Now go to the last keyframe, frame 250, and move the camera in forwards along the Y axis, and change the rotation slightly like so. You could probably go a little bit more nuts if you wanted, and that looks fine. So then if you play that animation back, I didn't. Okay. When you move the camera in, you need to set a keyframe for that as well. So we'll try that again. Alright. So there we go. We've got a basic camera movement. You can go, more or less, depending on what you want. That was the one that I used. Now the problem with this is if we render at frame 250, you can see that our sky here has got some weird problem going on, where basically we didn't paint past that, so it's not working properly. A quick way to fix that, if we go to frame 1 now, select this UV sphere, press S and X. Now this will scale it along the X axis only. We're going to stretch it out, and just looking at the figure in the bottom left hand corner, I'm going to set it to scale 1.15 along the X axis. Then if we move it to there, just slightly to the right, if we render that first frame, you can see it's okay on that edge. And then if we render frame 250, there we go. So that's a really quick way to fix that problem. The other thing that I found with the ocean as well, if that overlaps, you can also fix any tiling problems there by going into the image settings. So with this ocean selected, select under mirror, set that as X, and it will actually, once it's finished scaling, it'll just repeat the texture as a mirror, and it's very unnoticeable. So it's a really quick way to do that. Now, at the beginning of the video, I promised you that I'd be showing you a quick camera trick that I've learnt recently to achieve handheld footage. Now, the reason you need that for this is because it doesn't matter, if you're the best cameraman in the world with like a really expensive rig and a dolly system and all that other stuff, it's never going to look as smooth as this camera movement here. That's because the computer has done this. No human is ever going to match what the computer has done. So that is the main contributing factor to why a lot of animations don't look realistic, is because even with professionals that are using them on feature films, they still have little imperfections in their camera movements. Alright, so I'll show you a quick, easy way to add variations to your animations. Now, people on the Blender Guru mailing list probably already know this trick because I sent them an exclusive tutorial on how to use this for a light bulb, make it flicker. So if you want to learn more on that, subscribe to the list. Otherwise, I'll show you now. So what you can do now in Blender 2.5 is add noise to each of these IPO curves, or F curves as they're now called. So if we select, say, just this Y rotation, that controls the tilt, like that, okay? If we select that and press N over here, you can see that this sidebar pops up, and we've got here a new function called modifier. So if we click Add Modifier and then select Noise, as you can see, it's added this random noise here, and our animation over here is going haywire because, yeah, it's too random at the moment. But basically, that has added noise for the entirety of this animation. So it's a very handy feature that's been implemented into Blender 2.5, and I just use it for everything now. It's brilliant. So we're going to set this scaling to 70. So that's made it a lot smoother, but it's still, the waves are too big. It's tilting almost completely over this camera. So I'm going to set this to 0.02. That might actually even be too far, perhaps. No, it might be alright for the moment. But basically, that's just adding some slight camera movements, tilting it left and right, just to get that human imperfection in there. I'm going to do the same for, which one is this? The Z-axis rotation. So that's shaking it left and right, basically. Going to set that to 50. And let's change this to, that's too much there. 2 is probably too much as well. So I'm going to set that to 0.010. And that's giving it just a little bit of imperfection there. Where's the other one? X rotation. So that's the up and down one there. I'm going to set that to 70. And I'll just change this one to looks like seasickness at the moment. 0.02. So as you can see, the effect is very subtle. Just this movement here. But it does look a lot more realistic than if it was just a perfectly smooth camera movement. And that really is a big contributing factor, as I explained, to why a lot of computer animations look fake. It's because it's too smooth. So go nuts, shake it up with the new noise function added in Blender 2.5, and you can get far better results with your camera movement. So that concludes the camera mapping tutorial. I hope you've enjoyed it, you've gotten something from it. I'm always interested, of course, to see what you've created. So if you create something, show a link to it in the comments section, and look forward to seeing what you've done. Thanks very much for watching.